A teenage boy walks into a courtroom, dressed in a simple hoodie, underestimated and mocked by everyone, including the judge. But as the gavel slams down, Marcus Carter reveals his shocking truth. He's not just any kid, he's a legal genius in disguise. The battle for justice is about to begin. The courtroom was packed. The air buzzed with murmurs, the low hum of anticipation vibrating through the wooden benches. Spectators leaned forward, waiting to witness yet another tragic fall of a troubled black teenager, a scene that played out in this courtroom far too often. At the front, Judge Richard Holloway adjusted his glasses, already weary of the case. He had seen countless young men like this before, or so he thought. Same story, different face. Another reckless kid who had probably made bad choices and would now face the consequences. The doors at the back creaked open. 2 officers escorted in a boy in handcuffs. He was 17, maybe younger looking, with dark brown skin and intelligent but guarded eyes. His hoodie was slightly oversized, his jeans worn at the knees, and his sneakers scuffed, a look that the courtroom automatically associated with guilt. The bailiff announced, "Defendant, Marcus Carter, please step forward." Marcus lifted his chin, his face unreadable. He took slow, measured steps toward the defense table. The moment he reached it, one of the officers roughly yanked off his cuffs. A sharp metal clang echoed in the silent room. The judge exhaled loudly. "Let's just get this over with." He barely glanced up from his notes. "Mr. Carter, do you have legal representation, or should I appoint one for you?" The audience chuckled, some softly, some not bothering to hide it. A teen like Marcus representing himself. It was laughable. Marcus tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. Then he spoke. "Your Honor, I will be representing myself." The courtroom falls silent. For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. The judge's brows shot up. He looked at Marcus for the first time, actually looking, as if seeing him in a new light. Then he let out a mocking chuckle. "You, representing yourself?" The amusement in his voice was thinly veiled. "Son, this isn't a school debate club. This is a court of law. Do you even know what a motion to dismiss is?" Another ripple of laughter ran through the room. Even the prosecutor, a slick-haired man named Ethan Lowell, smirked as he leaned back in his chair, already smelling an easy victory. But Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't shift uncomfortably, didn't cast his eyes downward like most defendants did when the odds were stacked against them. Instead, he did the unexpected. He smiled, a genius in disguise. It wasn't a cocky grin. It wasn't the smirk of a reckless teen who didn't understand the weight of the moment. It was calm, measured, and unsettling. Marcus placed his hands on the table, standing a little straighter. "Yes, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "A motion to dismiss, under Rule 12b-6, is a procedural request to terminate a case due to insufficient legal grounds, but I doubt the prosecution would dare request one today, considering the gaping holes in their argument." The room froze. The prosecutor's smirk faded. The judge sat back, his expression unreadable. The spectators, once mocking, were now leaning in. Marcus looked straight at the judge, eyes gleaming with quiet confidence. "Shall we proceed?" The game had just begun. For a long moment, the courtroom sat frozen. The judge's smirk stiffened. The laughter from the spectators died in their throats, and the prosecutor, who had been so confident moments ago, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Judge Holloway cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Young man, this is not a game. You don't get extra credit for throwing around legal terms." Marcus tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "I agree, Your Honor. This isn't a game." That's why it's troubling to see that the prosecution has built its entire case on speculation rather than evidence. A murmur spread through the crowd. The power balance in the room was shifting, and everyone could feel it. The judge's jaw clenched. "Watch your tone, Mr. Carter." Marcus met his gaze without a trace of fear. "And you, Your Honor, should watch your impartiality." Gasps erupted from the spectators. Even the stenographer's fingers hovered above her keys, unsure if she had heard correctly. Did a 17-year-old just call out the judge to his face? For the first time, the judge looked genuinely rattled. The prosecution fumbles. The prosecutor, Ethan Lowell, cleared his throat loudly. He needed to regain control of the case before it spiraled out of his hands. "Enough of this nonsense," he said, flipping through his file. "The defendant, excuse me, Mr. Carter, is charged with breaking and entering, resisting arrest, and destruction of property. We have multiple witnesses placing him at the scene. This should be an open and shut case." Marcus didn't blink. "Would you care to elaborate on these so-called witnesses?" Lowell gave a smug smirk and held up a paper. "We have Officer Daniels, who saw you fleeing from the scene. We also have a shop owner who identified you as the suspect." Marcus nodded slowly, as if he were a professor entertaining a particularly dull student. "Ah, Officer Daniels, the same officer who was under internal investigation for falsifying reports in 2 previous cases." The room went deadly silent. Lowell's face twitched. "Objection. That's irrelevant." Marcus lifted his hands. "No, sir, that's credibility. If your key witness has a history of lying, how can we trust his statement now?" Judge Holloway hesitated. The objection should have been sustained, but something about the way Marcus spoke, something about his confidence, made it impossible to brush aside. The spectators were on the edge of their seats. The judge let out a slow breath. "Proceed." Lowell's smirk disappeared. He glanced through his notes, trying to find a way to regain control. "Marcus strikes again." Marcus stepped forward, placing his hands on the table. "Now, about the shop owner who identified me." Lowell quickly interjected. "Yes, the owner of Dan's convenience store confirmed that he saw you running from the crime scene." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? And would you be so kind as to tell the court when this supposed crime took place?" Lowell flipped to another page. 10:42 p.m. Marcus nodded. "Fascinating, because at exactly 10:42 p.m., I was live on my brother's Twitch stream, debating constitutional law with over 200 viewers." The entire room gasped. Lowell's face paled. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive, holding it up. "Your Honor, I have a full recording of the live stream, complete with timestamps, and I assume the court is aware that video metadata cannot be easily manipulated." Judge Holloway took a long, slow breath. His expression darkened. He had entered this case expecting to mock and humiliate another black teenager. Instead, he was getting schooled. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. The once smirking prosecutor was now visibly sweating. The judge loses control. Judge Holloway slammed his gavel down. "Enough. We will review the evidence after recess." But the damage had been done. The spectators, many of whom had assumed Marcus was guilty before the trial even started, now looked at him with awe. The judge had walked into this case, believing he was in control, but now, it was Marcus Carter running the show. Judge Holloway banged his gavel harder than necessary, his face rigid. The courtroom was no longer laughing at Marcus Carter. Instead, the once dismissive spectators sat at the edge of their seats, captivated by the young man who had just outmaneuvered a seasoned prosecutor. But Marcus wasn't finished, not even close. He could feel it, the nervous energy in the room, the prosecutor's shaken composure, the judge's clenched jaw. Something bigger was at play, and Marcus was about to tear it wide open. Judge Holloway sighed, rubbing his temples. "Fine, the court will review the Twitch footage. But Mr. Carter, do not assume that this alone is enough to clear you." Marcus tilted his head slightly, his sharp mind racing. Why was the judge still pushing? The evidence was airtight. He had just destroyed the prosecution's timeline. Then he saw it, the silent exchange of glances between Judge Holloway and Prosecutor Lowell. A flicker of something unspoken, a setup. Marcus's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a simple case of mistaken identity. They had wanted to convict him, and he was about to find out why. The trap unfolds. Marcus took a deep breath and flipped open his own folder, the one he had been waiting to use. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce new evidence. Lowell scoffed. New evidence? That's not how this works. Marcus ignored him. He walked straight to the court clerk and handed over a thick stack of documents. These are public records, he said, turning to the judge. Financial disclosures, property deals, and most importantly, arrest reports from the past 5 years. Judge Holloway shifted in his seat. For the first time, he looked uneasy. Marcus flipped to a specific page, holding it up. Your Honor, are you aware that 82% of juvenile arrests in this district involve young black men? Murmurs spread through the room. Even the spectators who had arrived with their own prejudices couldn't ignore the cold hard numbers. Marcus continued. Yet, despite this alarming rate, less than 10% of these arrests result in actual convictions, which raises the question, why are so many of these cases even making it to court? Lowell's jaw tightened. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Carter? Marcus smiled slightly, but there was no humor in it. I'm suggesting, he said, that this courtroom isn't about justice, it's about money. The corruption exposed. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Marcus turned the page. This document here shows a direct financial link between this court and a network of for-profit juvenile detention centers. These centers receive government funding based on the number of inmates they house. More inmates equals more money. And who is one of the largest investors in these facilities? He turned his gaze directly to Judge Holloway. You are, Your Honor. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Spectators gasped. Reporters scribbled furiously. Even the jury, who had been silent up until now, leaned forward, whispering amongst themselves. Judge Holloway's face had gone deathly pale. His fingers curled into fists on the bench. That's enough, Mr. Carter, he snapped. You are dangerously close to contempt. Marcus stood his ground. And you, Your Honor, are dangerously close to federal prison. The final blow. Lowell, who had been so arrogant earlier, now looked like a trapped animal. Marcus wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was exposing an entire system. Marcus turned to the jury, his voice steady. This wasn't about justice. This was about profit. I was supposed to be another statistic, another easy conviction to feed a corrupt system. The jurors stared at him, their faces reflecting a mixture of anger, shame, and realization. One of the older jurors, a white woman with gray hair, nodded slowly, as if she had just woken up from a long deep sleep. Marcus had done it. He had turned the system against itself, and now, the only people on trial were the ones sitting in power. For the first time in his long career, Judge Holloway was afraid. His gavel slammed against the desk, the sharp crack echoing through the courtroom. His voice, once dripping with authority, now trembled with forced anger. Order in the court. I will not allow this courtroom to be turned into a circus. But it was too late. The jury no longer trusted him. The spectators were outraged. The reporters were furiously typing, their headlines already forming in their minds. And worst of all, Marcus Carter wasn't done yet. The young genius attorney, the same black teenager the judge had mocked at the start of this trial, stood tall, his eyes locked onto Holloway. Your Honor, Marcus said, his voice dangerously calm. You're panicking. A wave of murmurs filled the courtroom. No one had ever spoken to a judge like that. Holloway's knuckles turned white as he gripped the gavel. Mr. Carter, you are in serious danger of contempt, and you, Marcus cut in, are in serious danger of a federal indictment. The room exploded again. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. This was about bringing down the man who had built a career profiting off injustice, and Holloway knew it. The evidence that changes everything. Marcus reached into his folder one last time. With slow, deliberate movements, he pulled out a USB drive and held it up for everyone to see. This, he said,
contains bank records, emails and wire transfers, all tying Judge Holloway to the private juvenile detention centers he's been funneling kids into. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Even the bailiff, one of Holloway's loyal enforcers, visibly stiffened. Judge Holloway's face turned a sickly shade of gray. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For years, he had controlled this courtroom with an iron fist. No one had ever dared to challenge him. But now, a 17-year-old had just brought his empire crashing down. The judge's desperate move. Holloway's breathing was ragged, his mind racing. He had to do something, anything to stop this. His eyes darted to Prosecutor Lowell, who sat frozen, drenched in sweat. They had been partners in this scheme for years. Holloway's mind snapped. "Bailiff," he barked, "seize that drive and detain Marcus Carter immediately." The crowd gasped. Marcus narrowed his eyes. "So that's how it is. You'd rather destroy the evidence than face justice." The bailiff, a tall muscular officer who had always followed orders without question, took a hesitant step forward. But then, he stopped. For the first time, he looked at the judge not with obedience, but with doubt. "Sir," the bailiff's voice was uncertain. I don't think I can do that." A stunned silence filled the courtroom. Marcus's words had done something no one thought possible. He had turned the entire system against its master. Judge Holloway's power was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Marcus's final words. Marcus stepped forward, locking eyes with Holloway. "This is over." The judge shook his head, his hands trembling. No, you don't understand. No, you don't understand." Marcus cut in. "This courtroom doesn't belong to you anymore." He turned toward the jury. "You have the power now. Will you let this man keep ruining lives, or will you deliver justice today?" The room fell silent. The jurors, who had once dismissed Marcus as just another troubled kid, now looked at him like a hero. And then, the forewoman stood up. Her voice was clear, steady, unbreakable. "We, the jury, find Marcus Carter not guilty." The crowd erupted in cheers. Judge Holloway's world fell apart. The judge's downfall. By the end of the day, the FBI arrived at the courthouse. Judge Holloway was placed under arrest for corruption, fraud, and conspiracy. Prosecutor Lowell resigned in disgrace. And Marcus Carter, he walked out of that courtroom not as a defendant, but as a legend. The news headlines told his story. Teenage genius destroys corrupt judge in court. Marcus Carter, the boy who beat the system. And as he stepped outside, greeted by cameras and flashing lights, Marcus Carter knew this was only the beginning.